Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Owoh's Corner, my own little corner of art. And today's stream is going along quite nicely. I'm back again working on this animation. It's actually been quite time consuming. There's definitely a lot of different details, small and big details to take account of. And it's taking me a while, but I'm definitely enjoying working on it. Really, if I were to put my fingers on it, the hard part for me would have to be doing the head, just because there's like a lot of details I have to account for. But for the most part, I'm definitely trying my best. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just working on the head. That's usually what I personally like to work on first, is the head. And I do know that as I draw this more and more, and just as I work on this more and more, my process definitely gets easier. I sort of try to get an idea of where the eyes are first, or rather, the line in which the eyes are meant to ride along. And then afterwards, it's kind of like a toss up on what I do next. Sometimes I do the mouth, sometimes I do the nose. It's really dependent, it's random for me, but it's really dependent on just what I feel like doing in the moment. Zooming out does, in fact, help sometimes, allowing me to get like a more, I guess one could say, holistic view of what it is I'm drawing and working on. I may have to rough out the nose, in fact. Hmm. Shoot, I meant to have the. Now she has these almond shaped eyes where they're a lot more rounder, but there is like this nice little swoop at the end of her eyes. Dang it. That's that one glitch that always irks me the most is when it glitches like that and then it'll fill out my whole um, object that I'm drawing. You know, I forgot to turn my notifications off. That is on me. I do apologize for that. And I actually am looking at her character art as I draw this and as I do this. Because I would say, for me personally, the difficulty really comes in drawing her chin. Not necessarily drawing her chin, but getting this angle for her jaw because it is very triangular shaped. And sometimes that's hard to depict. Now, if I were to just rough it out and like do a lot of chicken scratch drawings, then I would in fact be able to depict it better. But because I don't want to, I don't know. Like sometimes I get this sort of not performance anxiety, but I do want to ensure that I am depicting quality, especially the quality that I should be depicting when I'm streaming. It's sort of like this interplay between my role as an artist and my newfound role as a content creator. You see, I messed up with the hat. It could actually be a bit bigger. So, as an artist, even though the onion skin tool is good for letting you see your previous frame, sometimes you don't want to rely too much on it because it's not a matter of getting comfortable, but sometimes you'll think that you've drawn certain things when in reality you haven't. So just be mindful of yourself and what it is you're working on. That's my advice, at least. Because she's got this little poof at the front of her hair. Then she sort of has little afro puffs on the side. Like, that's really the thing that I have the most fun with, is doing her hair, because it's so fun trying to figure out, as well as it's just great that I am working on my ability to draw and create black characters. It's almost like a matching. Like, I have to make sure that the sizing is consistent. Now, when it comes to her earrings, that was just like a callback to the 90s, like the late 90s pop star era. I just wanted to make sure people understood the reference that was in her design. Because the big thing about the show I'm making is I want to make sure that I'm depicting cultures correctly. I want to make sure that these characters that I'm creating and giving life to, they have certain monikers of where they come from. Because that's a really big thing in this show, is that each character, it's sort of taking a, not necessarily, I would call it a modernist approach, but it's almost like an idealized reality that I'm trying to envision. That's another thing, is I have to make sure that the neck is right, because usually how it works is your neck is meant to align with the back of your head. Unless you have a skinny neck, then it would be a bit on the interior. And so women don't have Adam's apples, but sometimes you do have to create this sort of imaginary triangle or this imaginary arrow when you are drawing the neck. And since Miria is meant to be a statuesque woman, I sort of have to draw an impression of what her neck is meant to look like. You know, now that I think about it, I don't think I actually gave her a specific height. A lot of their heights are really just, I guess one could say, relative to each other. I would say, if I could describe it, Miria would be the second tallest female character and the fourth tallest character in general. There's one female character taller than her, and then there's two male characters that are taller than her. And it's actually funny because I know a question I'm gonna get is if there's any love interest in this series or if it's going to have like a subtext of love or romance. And my mentality is that this is a story about revenge. So these characters are like business co-workers. You're not supposed to have any entanglements with your business coworkers. And so each of these characters really have their own private life that is outside of the work they do as the Seven Sages. So for all anyone could ever know, they may have a life. They may have like kids or families or what have you, or they may be trying to get those things. But that's really more so on the private aspect of what they're doing and how they are working and operating. I will say that one of the characters, not this character, but her whole backstory is that the reason why she even joined the Seven Sages to begin with is because her husband and her children ended up being killed. So she comes from a place culturally where the family is very much valued. And so she is seeking revenge because of the consequences of other people, it led to the loss of her family. And so she joined the Seven Sages to get revenge for herself and the way she was wronged. Each of these characters have sort of a righteous fury or a righteous anger about them as to why they are seeking revenge. Like, this isn't just some. Like, these aren't just petty characters. Like, really, the story that I'm trying to tell and I want to tell with them is that this is a story about righteous fury and the six things God hates. And so each of these characters sort of have their own reason for why they are seeking revenge in the narrative, but the objective isn't to end on revenge. It's meant to sort of depict the meta commentary and the meta story and narrative is meant to be a dynamic representation of what a walk with Christ is. And so it's about the highs and lows. It's about the goods and bads. It's about the, for lack of a better word, hero's journey that we all go through. And so this story isn't meant to make an excuse for people seeking revenge, but it is to show that we as people are dynamic creations of the entity we serve and were created by. And so what I want to do in this story is really I wouldn't call it humbling people because I don't believe that people need to be humbled. More so, I would call it bringing people back to center, or rather, granting people understanding that they may not have picked up on or may not have realized. Shoot. Now, what I'm going to have to do is actually, I'm going to have to move this head because if you can see, it's not really. Well, actually, I may not have to move the head. I may can just move the torso because she is meant to be turning. Now, I'm going to have to take this. I'm going to take my pen tool. Shoot. Not my pen tool. My lasso tool. And so what I'm going to do is shift the neck. Uh-oh. While also shrinking it a little bit. Because essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reconstruct a pose that I didn't account for, or rather a pose that does not exist. So this right here is the neck. This right here is the shoulder. For the most part, this left shoulder can stay in position. And then it's going to be this, if I draw a line all the way through, so it's this next shoulder that's going to be right here. And then I can sort of draw the arm right there. But then this is going to shift her chest a little bit. And it's not something that I'll easily be able to just adjust with my pen tool. So I will in fact have to erase what I drew here. And I'll sort of have to create a guiding line for what it is I'm depicting. Because her chest is going to come up a little bit. And this is where I use the eraser tool to sort of clean up my mess. And again, that's one of the pros of animation, is especially when you're foreshortening, there are certain areas and places where you may not need to, let's see here, draw everything, because there's sort of this implied area Now, when it comes to this hand right here, I will in fact have to I'm using the red brush just so I can Because this is meant to be where her hand is. It is one frame, but sometimes that one frame can really make all the difference, especially when you're animating, especially when you're. I remember in the past when I would draw and when I would animate, usually on my second pass, there would be moments and times where I would actually forget. I would forget to draw certain things, or I would only hyperfixate on, say, like the arms or the legs, where I would deem like the key animation or the most important aspect of the animation was. And then that would end with me going into my final phase or sort of my tie down phase, and I would end up not drawing certain things, and I'd be like, "Wait, where is this arm? Why didn't I? Why isn't this arm here?" Or like I would turn off my onion skin, and I would be missing certain things, and I'm like, you know what? When I was doing my second pass or when I was doing my first pass, I forgot to draw this because I was so hyper focused on X, Y, Z. And I think that it's really the mistakes that make the animation. Like, yes, obviously, you want to make sure that you have a completed piece and you want to make sure that your animation looks as good as possible. But I would argue that when you have animation errors or when you notice that you messed up along the way, it humbles you so that you know that you still have a long way to go. The goal and the desire of every single artist and animator is to one day be able to get paid for their animations, to get paid for their art, so then they can make a living off of it. And it's really the mistakes in art that remind you, not only reminds you that you're human, but it also lets you know that you're still growing, you're still developing, and you still have quite the long way to go. And that's nothing to be sad or angry about. It's very humbling. That's it. It helps you stay humble. especially amidst adversity. And that's really the good thing about this animation is I'm looking a few frames ahead and the head actually stays pretty consistent. So, I don't know if I should tell y'all this. There's another little cheap trick you can do in the animation process where you actually sort of go to a previous frame and you can copy and paste certain objects. Like, say if it's the head, or especially if it's the head, what you can do is you can go to a previous frame and you can sort of like copy and paste the head. So then you don't have to work as hard or like do as much. But I think for the sake of like on model training, I'm not gonna do that for this stream. Cause like really, the most time consuming part for me has always been the head, especially when it comes to like the second pass phase and like the tie down phase is like drawing each individual frame for the head. But like once you get like a nice head shape, and that's usually what you see in like a lot of animations from your walkthrough to Invincible does it a lot. Not a lot. I'm not gonna disrespect Invincible, but Invincible does it. Walkthrough does it. A lot of different 2D animation projects do this thing where the head usually stays stock still, or rather, they don't make as many slight changes to the head unless it's like a slight stretching and squishing of the jaw and the movement of the mouth so that characters can talk. But for the most part, if you actually take the time to look at a lot of animations, they actually keep the head doesn't really change much unless the character is talking. They typically use like still frames for that, and then it's mainly the body that's moving. Hmm. I'm just taking a, I guess you could say, a mental second. Because, like, yeah, like, from my perspective, a lot of the aspects in her design are easy. It's really just getting that triangle shape for, like, the bottom half of the head. That's really the hard part for me. But for the most part, I love animating. Like, I love the whole entire process is fun to me. I love animating, I love drawing, I love giving life to the different ideas and concepts and stories in my head. It's very, very fun. Sometimes I just wish I had a team so then I could speed up the process. Okay. That's enough of that. Now let me... I'm going to use a diamond shape for the ears. That's what I do sometimes is, especially when it comes to like finding the head or at least finding the line for the eyes. Finding the ear first or like shaping out a rough guide point for the ears is what helps me. And then it sort of goes like this. Because what we have to realize is when it comes to proportioning for the eyes, we actually have geometric shapes along our face. That's how you get like your nose, the curvature of your nose. And I'm actually gonna have to, on my free time, I'm actually gonna have to work on my depth perception. Or not depth perception, but I'm gonna have to work on the way I depict depth and the way I depict, the way I depict depth in my animations and in my art. Like that's a reasonable thing I'm gonna have to work on. Cause then with this character, her cheek ridge and her eyebrow ridge is short with a very her eyebrow ridge no her cheek ridge is actually pretty long, but her eyebrow ridge is short. But then the angle of her cheek is very modest. So it gives her like this structured look for her face. And that's really the depiction I'm going for, is like this structured yet triangular aspect in her face. Because there's like this imaginary line through her cheek, through the end of her cheek ridge to the bottom of her ear that sort of gives like this almost isosceles triangle type shape. And that's really the difficulty that I've been having, is like depicting that short eyebrow ridge, but then that long yet modest angled cheek ridge. I mean, it's like I can do it because I drew it once. It's just the difficulty for me comes in when I am animating it and I have to keep my sizes consistent. Hello, Ender. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to Owoh's Corner, my own little corner of art. How are you doing today? So, it's going to be a short eyebrow ridge and a long forehead, and then the cheek ridge has a it's pretty long, but it's also modest. And then there's this isosceles triangle like shape in line with her chin. So it's actually pretty short. And then I go backwards and start erasing. I'm doing pretty good. Just a lot of mental math that goes into animating so that one can keep their art consistent. Because really, I would say the hardest thing about animating for me is just starting. Because once you actually fall into that habit, a lot of the different design and artistic principles really just fall into place. That's what I've personally learned. Is the hardest part is really just starting. But I think that's mainly just like a not a peer pressure thing. What's the proper word? I guess it's that's more of a psychology thing because what happens with a lot of artists and a lot of animators, and you know this, Ender, because you're an animator too, but it's really the play of how much time should we as animators be spending on certain things, especially if you're like a solo animator or if you don't have a team, because really the end goal for most animators is to either get an industry job or be able to go independent. And so, in order to go independent, you need to have a certain quality to your animation. And one of the things that creates quality within animation is one, how much time you're taking, and two, how much time you spend on certain things. To go more in depth, how much time you're taking is like, there's a reason why like 15 seconds of animation can take anywhere from 5 months to complete, is because you have to make sure you're drawing every single aspect. You also have to make sure that you are making sure everything is consistent and seamless from frame to frame. Animation takes time, so that's one aspect. And then another aspect that denotes quality is sort of how long you've been animating for. Like, there are people who've been animating for years now, and if you were to tell them to animate something in a week, then the quality, it may look a little bit better than, say, a fresh graduate or some high schooler, but it's still going to be low in quality than if you were to have given them, say, 2 months or 3 months or even four. And so, as an artist who's not in the industry, who is either trying to get in the industry or who is trying to go independent, like I'm actually very, I don't have any like harsh expectations. Like, I'm the kind of person that says, you know what, whatever God gives me, I'll work with it. So if I'm drawn to work in the industry, then that's good. If I'm drawn to go independent, then that's good. But I digress. You sort of have to make sure that you're showing people that your animations and your work is of good quality, but you also have to release content in a somewhat timely manner, so then you're not spending forever on projects. It's not necessarily a damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's more so operates under the guise of, you got to make choices. That's really it. You see, something about this jaw right here, I feel like I need to bring it up a little bit. It's irking me. I would say, really, what you want to be trying to do as an artist is really just focusing on building that intuitive skill, building that ability and capacity to where you know what the right call to make is. You know that something isn't right. Something just isn't kosher like dill pickles. That's sort of what I learned. And then sometimes, if you're having trouble, what can really help you is zooming out. And it's like, now I see what the issue is. This chin, this aspect of the chin needs to be. First, I need to angle it up a little bit. Just a tiny bit. And then I need to bring it over to the side. And then maybe angle it just a tiny bit more. I may have to zoom in actually. Oh. And then because of that, I now see that the ear is also off. One of the things I learned from watching other animators and other artists is they will actually erase entire segments of their animation, or they'll try to like redraw it from scratch. But as an animator, what I learned is that, if you're having issues pathfinding something, or if you're having issues locating certain aspects or drawing certain areas of your animation, you can just as easily like erase some things and then use your movement tool to shift it around. Because animation is fundamentally different from the other principles like illustration or graphic design or concept artistry. You really have to use just every tool in your arsenal in order to ensure that your work has the quality that is needed and required of it. And because I did that, I can now also see that I need to rotate the mouth. There's something wrong with the mouth as well. And it's not necessarily the lips, but it's primarily the mouth that needs like a little bit of rotating and shifting. So I can do. And then maybe a little bit. Take this lasso tool and shift this as well. Let me zoom out and try to get this. That's really the major takeaway I can take from this is like if you are ever stuck on a certain aspect of your animation and like you can't get an angle right or you can't properly draw something, then maybe you're just zoomed in too much. Because really, I wouldn't necessarily call it the main issue, but sometimes you have to see the whole object in perspective so that it allows you to do the mental gymnastics, or not mental gymnastics, but it allows you to see what you're working on in full. Hmm. Let me make sure I got this correctly. So, if I'm drawing the hips widening because she's shifting her body, that means that more of her left leg is going to be shown. Okay, that's good. Now, I do want to erase some of this just because when I turned off my onion skin, I actually noticed that it would actually come up a little bit more. Because what she is wearing is sort of this off the shoulder top. And so when I'm adapting it for my animation, what I'll have to do is make sure I find her shoulders. And then I would draw a line across here. It would be easier if I actually drew it. So I would actually have to draw a line across here. So I actually have the benefit of like not drawing too much of the shoulder because it actually doesn't exist. But if I were to, it would look something like that. Again. And this is actually going to help me when I do my final pass because I'll be able to actually just draw the various separate and different shapes. You see, I knew I was forgetting something. I forgot to draw her hair. Whenever you are animating or whenever you're working frame to frame, usually animation errors occur when typically the animator hyperfixates on one aspect. It can be anything from like a certain motion that the model is doing, or maybe trying to stay within proportions. It can cause the animator to hyperfixate on that one aspect, and then it leads to them forgetting to account for other things in the animation. So I was so focused on making sure that the head was proportionate, as well as the easing and in between of like her shoulders and her arms, that I forgot to even draw her hair. And these, it's pretty common. So if you are an animator and you do make mistakes and make errors from time to time, I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't be making any mistakes. But because of the nature of just animation in general and working on animations, sometimes they are unavoidable. And all you really can do is try your best to not make as many as you normally would. You know what? I forgot to do the earrings too. So I'm just doing a little bit of shorthand. Essentially, what I did was instead of drawing, instead of trying to figure out how to draw the head over again, I just drew over the previous depiction I made. And then I'm going to use my movement tool, my transform tool, in order to place this model for the head where I need it to be. Now, what I will have to do is play with the sizing and angle a little bit to make sure that it aligns at least as close as possible to where I have the head positioning roughed out. And so now that that is there, what I can do is I can finish drawing the rest of the body. Now, if I were to turn off my onion skin and zoom out and look at the character model in full, So really, movement really starts on this frame right here. So what I can do is just have a still, create a still frame. So I would end up deleting these frames. Some people there's a special way to like delete frames, but I just move them out the way. And usually this segment would be for like more intensive or cinematic animations where you would see like clothes billowing in the wind or maybe different like flinches or like small movements in the body. But for the sake of this animation, I'm just going to be using a still. Because the core of this animation is really that I'm just trying to focus on my more I'm trying to focus more on like my combat action centric animations. If I were to like do an animation exercise that's more emotional, then I would focus on the small elements. But for the sake of this, I'll just have this still frame. And really, in the overarching process, it's very much to each their own. What you prefer, how you prefer to do it or create it long term. It's really just a mind game and it's sort of like a thought exercise of what kind of story am I telling with this animation and what is it am I trying to create. And so if you can figure that out, then you know and you'll be able to figure out what it is you're trying to do. So it looks like I'm halfway through. This is actually coming along quite nicely. At least for like this first 3 seconds. Let me actually work. Let me actually look ahead real quick. Uh, so I would say, as far as work on the head goes, I can just reuse the same asset. There may be certain areas or moments where I may have to like change the angle or rotate it a bit, but for the most part, the head remains in its 3/4 state, and it's really just playing with the body movements. Let me actually turn off the onion skin, at least when it comes to this character. Now, for this other character, the pink one, she sort of has her. Now, her actual motion just is a bit of a clip, at least when it comes to like this first second. And then she's sort of like standing still. Then there's like this slow shift from battle ready position to like a charged position for her attack. And it remains a stilt frame. Now, what really is going to be not necessarily the hard part, but when I go over to this motion, she is looking straight ahead. It is then in this next segment of frame where it's sort of like her slow looking down at what is going on. There's going to be a bit of a still before she turns and goes to protect her ally. Now, this onward is just going to be a still, but it's mainly going to be the effects. I'm going to be animating effects in front of them. And I'm likely going to have to play with opacity, and I may end up using like 2 or 3 different layers to sort of draw and animate this. And then it's going to be a loop. Now, the actual antagonist, he's not really moving a lot. He mainly has like a collection of still frames. It's only when I do this camera pan when it's going to be like very extensive in his motions, and then I have this younger character that sort of comes in for the save. And his actual motion here is very quick. Not necessarily a blink and you'll miss it, but it's definitely going to be fast paced. This segment right here focuses on more combat, and then we're going to close out with these characters readying another attack. And that's pretty much how the animation is going to go. It's not necessarily hard, it's just going to be time consuming. If I were to give myself a time frame, because right now I am falling into a bad habit where I'm only drawing and animating, I would say, during my streaming times. But if I were to really buckle down and include streaming time with non-streaming time, I could probably get this done in about 2, maybe even 3 weeks time. It's just sometimes when I'm animating, I can accidentally fall into not necessarily a negative headspace. It's more like sometimes I get lost when I'm drawing and I don't really know what it is I'm animating or working on. But then when I stream, it's like everything comes to me. And that's really bad because I wouldn't say that I'm suffering burnout. More so, it's like I've worked so hard at trying to be an animator and trying to grow that now sometimes it feels like I'm only ever should be drawing to grow my social capital and to get bigger as a channel because I do want to start my own studio and be like a full-time animator and have a bunch of different projects I'm working on, but I'm not really at that stage yet. And it's kind of irksome and irritating. But really, all I can say is to tell myself to have patience and to try to be as consistent as possible and really focus on the final product, not necessarily trying to make as much content as possible. Because, like, I have been doing that, trying to make as much content as possible, and that hasn't really had much results. And then when I did try to focus more on, I guess one could say, focusing on the product, I sort of fell into a bad habit of I just stopped animating in general and I wasn't creating any art. And then that only made me feel more guilty. So I guess I just need to find a balancing act of producing off and on stream, as well as having finished products interlaced with my artistic process as an animator. And I mean, if I really took the second to just process my emotions and just how I feel, then I'd probably recognize that success doesn't really have a time limit. It's just sometimes we as people can fool ourselves into thinking that we need to make certain deadlines by certain points and times in our lives. I know I'm not talking. That's just because I'm really focused on the animation right now. I sort of just go into a zone where that's all I do. That's usually why I try to invite people to talk to me. So then I have certain subjects to go over while I'm animating because I know it can be quiet. Like, I really do wish that more people, like, you guys can ask me questions. You know that, right? Like, you guys can, like, if you ever have any questions or if you want to know what I'm doing or what software I use, like, I'm definitely open to it. You know, I was doing yard work yesterday, and like, I have a pretty big yard. So I had to mow the front and the back. And for the life of me, I couldn't find the thread for the weed eater. But I finally found it. Well, my mom finally found it. So now, after this stream, what I'll probably do is spend a good 2, 3 hours probably doing some more yard work. I would say, as an artist, though the end goal, at least for me, is to be able to make money on my art, start my own animation studio, XYZ, XYZ. I would still, in fact, like to have some sort of part time job. because it's really from life and from the actions of life, which is what fuels my creativity. Like, I would say a lot of the characters I've created came from different things in my day to day life. Like, this character right here, she was actually born from like me listening to music in my mom's car. And my mom, she's like in her I'm not about to give my mom's age. I'm not that terrible. But like, you know, I'm a 2000s kid. I was born in the year 2000, and I remember like my mom playing like 90s R&B and 90s hip hop and soul, and she would drive me to school and I would listen to like Prince, Destiny's Child, Urban Mystic, all these other artists, and then like me creating this character, she is very much 90s inspired. And like when I look at her, like I think of those times when I was in my mom's car, and like her power is based around her voice and music, and she's got that 90s pop star almost Y2K aesthetic brought into almost like this cyberpunk future. And that was sort of the birth of that character, of this character. And it's sort of a love letter to the times, if I could call it that. Now, I would say let me bring out some more art. Now, I would say this character, Nancy, he was more so born from. Okay, so he has multiple different inspirations. So, for starters, he's inspired by Jeremiah from the Bible. For those of you who may or may not know, Jeremiah is the youngest prophet. He was 20 years old, and basically, his whole book is about how old folks are too prideful to listen to people younger than them. But if you also look closer to his design, he also draws inspiration from like Louisiana Creoles, as well as that sort of like young adult series. So like Vampire Diaries, Teen Wolf, what's the other one? Vampire Diaries, Teen Wolf, and there was another popular show, but I forgot the name of it. That's what he's inspired by. And so I was also creating him, and he's also inspired a little bit by Neapolitan from Ruby. Basically, like, he's a short illusionist. Like, that's another inspiration I got from him. But he also has, like, other biblical and other, like, young adult themes as well. Like, he's a love letter to my, like, fandom young adult era I had when I was, like, a teenager. Um, and yeah. Now, these two characters, Selah and Father Jovial, they are inspired, they're tertiary characters, but they're mainly inspired by like my religious journey, which is one of them is like a straight up priest and he has his own church, that's him. And then Selah, he's more so focused on like personal relationship. And so that's why he has like the curly hair, he has lamb ears. I'm actually designing his older brother right now. I have like a whole character sheet I'm working on. But yeah, like there are different ways I draw inspiration from characters, and like I just noticed something. Like I use a lot of cool colors, especially like purple and purple adjacent colors. Like this guy has like purple socks. The priest has like a lighter purple sash. Nancy, his whole design was caked in purple. Like, I don't know why. Like, I think I just have like a subconscious purple phase. I'm not sure. But like, there are different ways I. Oh, and I even forgot. to mention it. I wonder if I can. Yeah, I can. So he actually has like these big glossy, like doughy eyes. He's very much Selah is very much inspired by like innocence. That was sort of the theme I was going for him, like the innocence of a child. That's what I wanted to do. But yeah, there's so many different ways you can draw inspiration from the different things in your life, which is why I always say, like, if you're an artist, try to draw inspiration from the world around you and the existence that you live. Like, try to have different things that sort of is not focused on your moneymaker, but focus more on your relationship to people. That's what I learned. That's what I did. And that's how I adapt to my present state. I think I'm gonna have to shift it just a little bit. This is one of the things that I sometimes have issues with is like I'll turn the onion skin off and then it's like this, like something is wrong with her head. Like I just don't know what it is, but something feels off with it. And that's really why I find myself using chicken scratch often, is because it allows me to block out the head better. And maybe it's just a me issue. Like I think one of the things I fall for, or one of the difficulties I have, is it's like there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this eye. It's like this eye. It's like this eye right here. Ooh, it's like shit. I still have the eraser tool selected. My bad. It's like this eye right here, and then where this chin is. I keep getting these issues, and I think it's because maybe it's because I'm so used to the chicken scratch. But it's the chicken scratch that it's the hash marks that I make, and it's like the dirty marks that I create that really helps me build and develop what it is I'm working on. Like I can't. And then maybe if I like lowered it a little bit, but then I'd have to shrink it some more. It's like that's really the hardest part for me. Is like trying to make sure that it's consistent. But then if I do that, I'm actually gonna have to maybe like lower the eye a little bit. And then like that's more consistent. That actually looks kind of better. Cuz like the hardest part is figuring out when you're supposed to make your slight adjustments, because what you could do when you're animating is you could just see the issues but animate all the way through because of deadline, or you could catch the issue where it is now and then move along, but you may have more issues. And while I'm here, I can actually make the ear slightly smaller. I mean, you're not going to see it because it's going to be hidden by her hair. But it's still good to notice where you're lacking or where you're having issues with. So then you can fix it then and there. Then just redraw something for the sake of the animation and mess up. And it's definitely with the inclusion of eyes and pupils that just gives the animation more life. And all I can really say is there's something about giving your animation a face. It's almost like, in its own silly way, you're almost giving the animation life in a sense. That sort of helps everything come together. So then you're not sitting in some void or just working on like the raw gesture of the animation. I don't know. Like eyes are the windows to the soul. And so when you give the animation eyes, it gives the character almost a semblance of life. And it's that life that allows you to resonate with your own, that you as the artist allows you to better draw and create the character while also allowing your audience to gain some form of relationship or familiarity with this character. And like that's a whole thing. That's a whole diatribe I could talk about because I could talk about like the 2010s fandom culture, like post satanic panic when all the teens and all the kids were like on online forums like Reddit or fanfiction.net, and we were talking about our favorite characters and how much we love this character and how we wish like, oh, this should have changed or this should have happened or this character should have had this arc. There was a lot of competency being learned in that time. And shoot, like I'm actually gonna have to turn on a fan and open my windows because my room is getting freaking stuffy. Like it's getting hot. I'm just now feeling it like this late into my live stream. Like, oh my gosh. And I'm actually doing something a bit new and different. I'm working on a theory video. I kind of want to broaden my horizons, so I'm actually working on a theory video for Genshin Impact. And I don't know, I just really love that game. Like, that game is so fun to me. I love the story, I love the lore, I love how people manage to weave and figure out so many different story aspects in the backstory of the world. Like, on one hand, it is inspired by Gnosticism, but then on the other hand, it also, what I've noticed is that it actually has like almost this Babel, like Tower of Babel type aesthetic to it, where there's like a division of languages and division of peoples, and that world just feels so alive at times. I love it. I don't know if y'all can hear it, but there's like a bird chirping outside my window. And I know this. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have a studio. I'm doing all of I don't think I've ever told y'all this, but I'm doing all of this like outside of my bedroom door. Like I don't have a private studio. I don't have a sound chamber. I'm just doing this from where I sleep. Which I mean that has its own sort of like campiness to it. That sort of familiarity factor where I'm the common people's because I am. I will always be the common people. Like, I don't come from money. I don't have an ostentatious life. I'm not really the kind of person who flexes. I would never flex. I would never. And that's probably why I'm as small as I am, is because I choose not to flex on people or flaunt what I have. Because the algorithm likes fads and people hopping on trends and all this other stuff. I just focus on my animations and I try to go indie. And that has its own issues because it takes me so long to animate something, but actually speaking of, I could probably adapt this or like make a short from this. There's not much left for me to do, but I've already streamed for like 2 hours straight. And I know you folks have better stuff to do. I'm not in the business of holding people hostage and making you watch me for hours on end. Just, if anything, like an hour and a half to 2 hours will do. I do hope you all enjoyed though. And I'll likely be back on Tuesday. Like I said, I stream Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually around noon. I also like to at least try to release like shorter form animations when I can. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. This has been Owoh's Corner, my own little corner of art, and I'll see you guys in my next video or live stream. Bye.